Dòng sông rất là đẹp. Đăng này. Đây. Đẹp không? Xã Bình Mỹ đây vậy đó. Chỉ còn khoảng 4 mai nữa thôi là tới rồi. Đến nơi thì sẽ đi lên tàu đi chơi. Đây tới nơi đi tàu nha, chuẩn bị đi tàu, mọi người mua vé nè. Bạn mình đang đứng mua vé. Bây giờ chuẩn bị lên tàu để đi chơi nha. Boat tour. Đây là con đường đi xuống tàu nè. Đây. Đi xuống tàu, đi vòng quanh tham quan nha. Mọi người đang xếp hàng đi xuống.
Có chuyến khác nữa.
Just the first name?
Lee, L-E. Kim. Kim Hoàng.
Yes.
Okay.
Two?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nè, xuống tàu thôi.
Rồi nhớ tàu này đi Phú Quốc sợ quá.
Ừ. Cho nên là cũng hơi lo trong bụng á nha.
Không, mà nó không sống gì đâu.
Đâu có biết được. Hello, Duy Linh. Hello. Đây, xuống tàu đi chơi. Rất là đẹp luôn. Vậy mọi người lên tàu rồi. Hai đứa đang chuẩn bị đi đây. Lên tàu đi nha.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome aboard the Eden Star. My name is Carl. I'm your naturalistic guide for the trip. My crewmate Kênh checked in up top and got us shoved off. Our captain today is Captain Doug. He's going to have us out for about 3.5 hours. We'll talk about history and culture of the area. We will look for wildlife. That's everybody's job. First, we're going to talk briefly about safety. Now, we are a Coast Guard inspected and tested boat. We pass with flying colors every year, and we have never needed any of our rescue gear or emergency equipment. We don't want to start, but you just never know. So in case something does happen, we need to know where the life jackets are. Here in the upper deck, under the white cabinets we're sitting on, we have adult and solid-size life jackets. Each cabinet labeled the appropriate number and size of life jackets on board. If we need to pass those out quickly, we need to grab the right size. So we remind you the adult size for anyone over 90 pounds, child size for those 90 pounds and below. If the boat is going down, it's the wrong time to lie about your weight. We will distribute, the crew will distribute quickly for those down below if they need to be passed out. Now, we've never had to deal with a man overboard situation. We don't want, that used to be just the funny part. Hey, don't go swimming from the boat, until somebody on another tour boat in the bay about 3-4 weeks ago decided it would be cool to open a gate, jump off the boat, and make the crew rescue them during a tour. Yes, it actually finally happened. So now I'm obliged to let you know that should you leave the vessel voluntarily during this trip, you could be subject to a federal fine of up to $30,000 and up to 5 years in federal prison for violating Coast Guard regulations and federal maritime law. Please do not leave the boat until we tell you it's safe to do so back on the dock at the end of our journey. For your safety and ours. Because if you go in the water, guess who's got to go in the water and rescue? It's a little chilly for that. Water's about 54 degrees. Stay on board. Yeah, I wish that was still the funny part of it all. In the event of any kind of actual emergency, please let the captain and crew do their jobs. Stay back, stay out of the way, stay clear unless we ask you to perform a specific function. The only exception, you see a napkin or a candy wrapper burning on the deck in front of you, you have closed-toed shoes, you're welcome to stomp it out quickly. That's just fine. Otherwise, let us take care of the emergencies. The heads or restrooms down beneath my feet in the rear of the main cabin. We have men's and ladies flush toilets. They are dry flush camp toilets with a foot pedal. They hit the pedal, everything should fall down below. Right now they're clean and open for use. If you've noticed they need a little attention during the trip, let the crew know. By crew, I mean Kênh. And we'll take care of that right away. Now, we are going to see some wildlife. We have them available for rent for the duration of the trip. $5 a pair. Kênh will be up here momentarily. But if he comes up, if you want to borrow some binoculars, give him away. He'll come to you. They're cash only. We have change, but small bills are always appreciated. That was plenty for everybody. There's more for the folks downstairs. We will come to everyone on the boat to offer the binoculars. we have all the major food groups: sugar, salt, caffeine, and chocolate. There's no smoking during the trip. Off to our right-hand side is Bar Island. This is attached to Bar Harbor by Bridge Street at the bottom of West Street. You can walk or drive across the bar at times of low tide. Now we just passed full low tide, so by the time we come back in, the bar will be completely underwater. But every day from 2 hours before low tide until 2 hours after, you can come out to the island. This evening, it's probably going to be around 7:30, 8 o'clock. The bar becomes visible again. It might be in time for a sunset. Now, you don't want to push that stuff out of the water. Come back late to your vehicle and find your car is under 6 feet of water. Please don't let that be you. Not only is it expensive to repair a vehicle that's been under 6 feet of salt water for hours, it's really humiliating. We know that firsthand, not as the victims, but as the perpetrators. Our captains all have the same twisted sense of humor I have. When we see a car going underwater on a bar, if our boat's nearby, we'll go right over to the bar, take pictures, take video, put it all over social media. I'd encourage all of you to do the same. We've done it before, we'll do it again, we'll never apologize for it. So don't get stuck on the bar with your car. Now, if you do walk across Nike on the island, it is part of the Acadian National Park. If you lose track of time and you're stuck on foot, you have a few options. You can swim 150 yards in 55-degree water. Not an attractive option for most people. You can put your feet up if you brought snacks and water. Relax and wait for the tide to turn, 5-6 hours or so. Or you can call the harbor master or local authorities. They'll send someone to rescue you. They're going to charge you $150 a person to carry you 150 yards to safety. And I know Galen will be up with those binoculars any moment now. By wealthy summer residents. Members of the committee started by Charles Eliot, the president of Harvard at the time, along with George Dorr and John D. Rockefeller Jr. That became Cerdamont National Monument. In 1919, Congress made it a full-fledged national park, gave it the name Lafayette National Park. In 1929, when they added Scoodic Peninsula, over on the far side of the bay, they changed the name to Acadian. Bar Island didn't become part of the park until, gradually over the second half of the last century. Bar Island used to be Roddick's Island. It was a farming island owned by one family. They farmed here. Basically, the town we now know as Bar Harbor was a little village called Eden. There were some fishing boats. There was a lumber camp nearby. There were some farmers on the island. But there really wasn't much going on in this little town at all. And then some of the richest people in the world started coming up here, drawn by these beautiful landscape paintings painted by Frederick Church and Dwight Blaney and other Hudson River School artists. Pretty soon they were building grand hotels, big summer cottages, and they were staying up here all summer long, some of the richest people in the entire country. This became a playground for the rich and famous from the late 1800s to the mid-1900s. So the Roddick family around the turn of the last century decided to sell their farm. The island was subdivided by a developer for cottages, and they built a grand hotel over there in Eden, Maine. Now, folks needed boats to get here, they needed boats to get around, but this could be a rough place for boats during bad weather. It was not a natural, intuitive place to place a harbor, and somehow everybody started bringing boats up here. So in 1905, J.P. Morgan, probably the richest man in the country at the time, he's got the biggest yacht in the world, the Corsair. He doesn't want to be bothered by storm waves rolling right up the mouth of the bay, so he gets the government to build a man-made breakwater out there ahead of us. It's that big stone wall, 80 to 100 feet high, built up from the bottom of the bay, over 150. Attracted more fishing boats, tour boats, private yachts. These days, during the non-COVID year, we'll get 150 to 170 cruise ship visits, including some of the largest cruise ships in the world. So folks started calling it by a new nickname. With the bar right behind it and an active working harbor with safe anchorage, they called it the Bar Harbor. By 1918, that nickname became exclusive. Nobody called the town by its name Eden anymore, and the town council just changed the name of the town permanently to Bar Harbor. Off to our left are the 4 Porcupine Islands. We'll talk more about those when we come back in. But from this angle, you can see the shape of them and how they got their name. When seen from the Western Hills by early Abenaki, hundreds of years before Europeans came here, All this group of 4 islands all have a long, gradual northern slope, a higher, more rounded southern end. And hundreds and hundreds of years ago, they were covered exclusively in evergreens, so they look much more prickly than they do nowadays. And the Abenaki in their language called them the porcupines. This is the shore path, protected by a concrete seawall. And it's open to the public, has been since the 1880s. If you want to come out here and see the big cottages and check out the boats on the water, it's a nice little stroll. So I've used the word cottage several times, and you might be looking around looking at these big houses and you're not seeing any cottages. Because when you hear the word cottage, you're thinking 2 or 3 bedrooms, a fold-out couch, maybe an outside shower if you're near the beach. There's 2 kinds of summer properties here in Maine. If you're inland, it's a camp. If you're near the shore, it's a cottage. It doesn't matter how big it is. The cottages we're talking about, so one of those, hidden behind the tree to our right, we'll see it fully in a moment, the Balance Rock Inn. Today, one of the largest bed and breakfasts in town, built as a single-family summer cottage of over 9,000 square feet. Those are the summer cottages we're talking about. The Balance Rock in front of it, the big boulder, is a glacial erratic, dropped off here by the glacier at the end of the last ice age, 10,000 years ago. It moved exactly once since the glacier left it behind. It fell over and came down slope about 5 feet, about 40 years or 30 years ago. Towards 2 o'clock, you see a Tudor-style house with timber framing and white stucco. That's a modest little 7,800 square foot summer cottage. John Jacob Astor had that built as a wedding present for his 19-year-old grandson who was getting married back in 1905. Yeah. 7,800 square foot summer cottage for your 19-year-old grandson. Somebody's setting that bar a little too high. Now we're going to go around the end of the breakwater in a moment. The 2 mountains closest to us up here, 1 and 2 o'clock, are Door Mountain. Cadillac Mountain named for we came over here from France. Trade with the D, not trader as in. Anyway. It was Antoine Lamoth. He purloined the use of a noble title, this here in a Cadillac, to get some advantage in the New World because he came from a common family. He was a very successful trader, set up a trading settlement near what is now Bar Harbor, and a trade route all the way across the North Country to what's now Detroit, Michigan. He founded Detroit and was later governor of Louisiana Territory. The mountain in front of that is Door Mountain, named for George Door, the first superintendent of the park, the man we call the father of Acadian. The green and red houses to our right are shingle-style cottages designed by an architect named William Ralph Emerson in the 1880s. While dozens of his designs were standing on this island at one time, most were lost in the 47 forest fire. These are the last 2 still standing. In fact, Redwood is the last house we'll see on this stretch of the coast, with one exception that predates 1947. That's the year that Maine burned. Now, all across the state it was hot and dry, and we lost 2 million acres in the state of Maine to forest fires and brush fires. Nothing happened here on the island until October of that year, when a local resident burned trash in his backyard garbage dump. Lost control of the burn, and 10 days later, he was responsible for wiping out about 70,000 acres of the island. Burned from Crooked Road down into and around Bar Harbor, down the shoreline between the mountains over here to our right, and all the way down to Sand Beach. Wiped out 6 grand hotels, 60 big summer cottages along Millionaire's Mile, and 178 year-round homes for the working families like us who could at least afford it. Now, there was very little loss of life during or as a result of the fire. 5 people died, 2 in a car wreck, 2 from smoke inhalation, heart failure. And one gentleman has been rescued once, went back to his neighborhood to find a family cat, was never seen again. Everyone else worked together, got out by car, by boat, by truck, any way they could to get out away from town. After the fire, the island started to change. A lot of those expensive properties were not rebuilt. Wealthy families donated land to Acadian or sold to developers, and that's when the developers started developing more modest properties. Hotels, motor courts, smaller hotels, smaller cottages and campgrounds. So it was after the 47 fire when this gradually became a place that everybody could afford. I think that's what George Dorr had in mind. He was on that committee that started gathering up land in the late 1890s to eventually create this park. And of all the rich people who donated generously to create Acadian steel and shipping and rail, they had a 35-room summer cottage just above this cobblestone beach at 2 o'clock. A house called Old Farm that his family and parents built in the 1870s. In the 1890s, when he was about 40 years of age, he inherited all of it. He never married, never fathered children, and instead of going into the family businesses, he made the preservation of this island his life's work. In 1916, he became the first superintendent of the park. He would accept $1 a year as a federal salary, so they call him a federal employee. Otherwise, he paid his own way. And every other penny his family had ever earned went into creating the park. He died in 1944, a couple months before his 90th birthday, and he owned literally nothing. He had his park uniforms. He was living in a house he had already donated to the park. Stroll through the woods off of Main Street, just south of downtown on the left-hand side. And if you do that at twilight, they say you might bump into George. Tell him I said hi. Compass Harbor Trail. Yeah, if you get to the Compass Harbor apartments, just past it. On the left-hand side, just south of the ball field. Comes right out to these beaches. Nice little walk. Now the houses over here to our right are much newer, built the last 20 and 30 years. They sit on top of what we call Saul's Cliff. Named for an earlier resident of this island, Solomon Higgins. He was not a wealthy industrialist, he wasn't a great leader of men or a philanthropist, he was a farmer. Just a farmer. Moved up here in 1761 with a land grant from the governor of Massachusetts, set up a farm not far from these cliffs. Went to fight in the revolution, came back afterwards. One of his descendants read a lot of family letters and journals and thinks that he might have suffered from what we now know of as dementia. Could have gone off the cliff in the storm. Others think he was a drinker after the war and toddled off the cliffs drunk. Still others think he might have taken work on a merchant ship for one last great adventure, went to sea and left the farm to his grown children. He had 8 children from 2 wives who predeceased him. And there's always that nasty story going around, because somebody's got to tell the nasty story, that one of his sons didn't want to wait for his inheritance and there was foul play involved. All the licenses are accounted for. Each one's allowed to put out up to 800 traps. In July, August, and early September, when lobstering is at its peak, there are 4 to 5 million lobster traps in the Gulf of Maine, more than Canada and southern New England combined. Fishing. Some folks think it may be unsustainable, that we might be overfishing. In fact, we have scientific evidence that the reverse is true. And the more we fish the way we fish with current gear and the current laws in the state of Maine, the more lobster we have every year in the Gulf of Maine. Not despite lobster fishing, but because of lobster fishing. I'm going to explain how that works later on, because it doesn't seem to make sense, but I like a little suspense in my boat trip. Now the mountain ahead of us is long, the entire coast of Acadian, what the French would call their foothold in the New World. From eastern that was us, you're welcome. They didn't find any bodies, so of course he was convinced, especially when somebody else was finding the rings, that it had to be Dr. Bruno and his brother, who came back 30 years after they died in the house to save the house from the fire one last time. Coast of Maine, ghost stories, Stephen King, I told you. Now, Jackson Lab's owned that house since the 50s. In the 1960s, a couple of Hollywood producers came up here. They got permissions that have always been private. They're adjacent to or surrounded by Acadian National Park, and their private property status is protected by the park charter. When Congress ratified that charter, they added the condition that anyone with contiguous lands to any portion of the national park, Acadian National Park, cannot have their lands taken away, that the park can only be expanded by accepting free donation of land. They can't buy land on the open market. it for fear they would try to influence somebody to sell. They cannot use evidence. The schooner can outrun its big heavy man of war, so he orders men to open fire right away. They did so. He heard return fire. Your echo coming off Champlain. He ordered them to turn the boat and fire again. Every time they turned to fire broadside, they turned closer to the cliff until they could finally see what they were really shooting at. And he ordered them to cease fire. The trips on this boat, as we see so much of Acadia, is pointing out places that too many people overlook. It's a crowded place in summer. By now, you guys probably know that. The schoonerhead overlook to our right-hand side is a popular parking area up in the treetops here. Right off the loop road, you take a left-hand turn just before the booth where you show your pass, brings you out to that parking area. 99% of people who come to that overlook get out, take some pictures from the split rail fence, get back in the car, and keep driving. They think the hike, if you go through the fence, they think the walk down must be too rugged or steep. It's paved. It zigzags. It's an easy place to get to. And it's a beautiful late morning in summer, and there's nobody there. The most crowded I've seen this place, I saw 15 or 20 people spread out on these cliffs one time. Get away from everybody who's getting away from it all. Stop at Schoonerhead Overlook. It's also right along the Schoonerhead Road that you can take just south of the Compass Harbor Apartments off Main Street. Walk on the cliffs. Bring a blanket or a folding chair. Bring a picnic. If you want some exercise, do some climbing and exploring. Be very careful with the water's edge. I would avoid the caves and water's edge. It can be dangerous if you get too close, especially if there's any kind of waves at all. But it's a fun place to relax, fun place to explore, and it doesn't get a lot of traffic at all. I'm going to point out a few of these places during our trip because I'm not from around here. I'm not the local who won't tell you the local secrets. I moved up here from Connecticut about almost 7 years ago after being a visitor here for 23 years. And the locals don't tell you a lot of these little things you got to look for. A lot of people don't have the time to look for everything. I had 23 years to look for everything. I'm still looking, so I'm going to tell you the ones that we can spot. Ahoy, the Yankee Rambler. A little fishing boat to our right-hand side. That's our private charter boat, the Yankee Rambler. That can be rented for groups up to 6 people. We'll take you fishing, sightseeing. You pretty much choose whatever you like to do on the boat. If it's legal on the water. We also have a party fishing boat. The Islander, they're out this morning on their 4-hour trip. They go from 8 to 12 and then from 1 to 4 to party fishing. Now just the other side of the trees to our right-hand side is the end of the Schoonerhead Road. That parking area is also the trailhead for one of my favorite walks in Acadia, the Great Head Trail. Has anybody already done the Great Head Trail? 6-foot waves at least. Don't wait for Thunder Hole. Come for the view. Come to play on the rocks. Bring a picnic. Bring your paint set if you're an artist. Bring your camera. Don't come for Thunder Hole. What's that? Yes. Thank you for asking. You notice this on the stairway. There are 2 or 3 gates. Were swept off the rocks on the upper level, just below the road. 6 of them were recovered. An 8-year-old girl was not recovered. That's one of the several people who lost their lives here during rough weather. So if you come out during rough weather to see Thunder Hole, please be very careful. Stay up as high away from the water as you can. Even on a fairly calm day, watch yourself near the water line. Now right now it's low tide. You can see the barnacles above the low tide line. And above the barnacles, you have darkened dry rock. That darkness in many places is a black algae called Vangia. When it's thick enough and it gets wet, it can be as slippery as grease. So if you come down and stand on that dark rock and the waves just splash your feet, you can find yourself suddenly paddling and slipping away over the barnacles. That's going to hurt. And if the waves are a little higher, it'll carry you over the barnacles and you may or may not get back out of the water. So be careful at water's edge. Everything in the Acadian National Park is at your own risk. When they close those gates, they put up the signs. The rangers don't have enough people to come out here and guard every place where people might do something fool on you. So I'm not going to use the word common sense because I'm convinced that there's nothing common about it. Please be extra careful near the water's edge whenever you're exploring the park. But definitely explore the park. Enjoy this place. Take your time. We're going to come out past Outer Cliffs, around Outer Cove. Get a look into practice all your different waves. The royal wave, the parade wave, the SOS wave, and the Forrest Gump wave. Now you don't have to be a mountain climber to get up to the cliffs. The ocean path comes up this way, a nice easy walkway that cuts through the woods. And Ocean Drive has a parking area right across the street. You come right down those stone stairs, wave to everybody on the boats, make them think you climbed up there. Don't worry, I won't tell anybody.
Có xe chạy cái đó được đó mà. Chiều nay mình tới đó. Lên đó hả? Hôm qua là mình ở bên kia. Tại vì hôm qua mình vô mà mình không có vé. Vé xe. Dạ. Vé thật.
Now we're coming around Otter Point. Samuel de Champlain, when he first came up here, sailed into the bay, looked around, and was ready to sail away because he thought this island was a useless pile of rock. When it came around Otter Point and cut it a little close, the wind and waves blew them onto the rocks, they damaged the ship, and moved up into Otter Cove to make repairs. It was then that he had a chance to walk around the island. They met the Abenaki natives. They learned how to communicate with them. They realized the Abenaki were eager for trade. They were pretty shrewd businessmen. They were shown abundant game and fertile soil. So ultimately he did recommend this island for French settlements, and there were several here by the late 1620s. So they brought stuff out, dropped it off, came back as the next one guy to work on it. It's all granite. No concrete in 1790. Locally hand cut. It's been a while since it's had a whitewash. The times they try to keep a flame going on top of it, there have been several different flagpoles out there over the years.
Where? Oh, the twin cave. Yeah, look at the color. It's pretty. Here, I'll take it.
Cảnh tàu rất là đẹp luôn á. Tàu quá đẹp luôn. Và biển nó yên tĩnh nè, sóng yên á, cho nên mình đi mà tàu nó không có bị gì hết. Đánh tàu. Cái nước rất là đẹp luôn. Tàu quá đẹp luôn. Và biển nó yên tĩnh nè, sóng yên á, cho nên mình đi mà tàu nó không có bị gì hết. Đánh tàu. Đây là cảnh ở Bahama, rất là đẹp luôn. Đánh tàu. Tôi đang đi trên tiểu bang ở Maine.
Both moved up here several years apart, and they're both multi-billionaires. They did nothing better with their money, so they both bought up a pair of $5 million houses, leveled them, and built much larger, more expensive houses. That's the nature of sibling rivalry, apparently. Who can build a bigger, uglier house in Northeast Harbor, Maine? Go figure. Stevie Rails, one claim to fame. One of the companies he owns is a production company that produced the movie The Grand Budapest Hotel. So he has some claim to an Oscar apparently. Merchant vessels from all over were coming up this way for the fur trade, and when they're in this region, they heard by word of mouth that fresh water was easily available on this body of water, so they all came to look for that. Out at 10 o'clock, see the dark rocks along the beach, and a little trickle of water coming down out of the tree line. That's Man-O-War Brook, this partially spring-fed waterfall. It's built right into the sound. The water's deeper than Drive. It's off of Route 198. It's the back way into Northeast Harbor. So if you come to the end of Eagle Lake Road, turn left on 198 towards Northeast. There are a few places to stop along the way to get pictures of the day. One of the turnouts had some information.
Đây, sát bờ biển luôn. Đấy, rồi trên nhà có cái cầu tàu nè. Cầu tàu để mình đi tàu, cái mình lên nhà mình nè. Đó.
he developed his own church here, along with a church school that was open to the public for free. The local working families could send their kids to a good quality school here on the island that he and his wife established. They also did a lot of charity work for people who are out of work. This was before the rich people started coming. This was a fairly poor place, a fishing village and a lumber camp, and a lot of people looked for fresh water. Probably ran a little heavier back 200-300 years ago. But this has been a pretty good summer. We haven't had a lot of rain lately. It's still flowing pretty steady. Had a very wet July, so it's been coming partially spring fed, partially rain runoff. But with all the rain in June and July, we've got a much better water table this year than we had the last couple of years. We had a couple of really dry summers, and there were days last summer when that was literally just a drip, 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 drip. 1613 settled right on that grassy knoll at the mouth of Somme Sound called Fernald Point. A water skier up here, really? That's the first water ski I've ever seen up here. With all the lobster buoys and the small power boats, the fun speedboats, the jet skis are a pretty rare thing up here. That and the water's really chilly. Oh, good for you. Wild animals versus aggression with humans is two totally different things. Human aggression is an emotion. It's a choice. Wild animals, any wild animal can be aggressive to any other animal, including people around the island. And you very well may. They're solitary animals. They only hang out here together because they've all found the same safe place to hang out all year long. And it's an extension of their mating season. So if you see them at one time in the rocks, give them a good 50 yards.